Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing cults and what your legal options might be if you or someone you care about is in a cult. So let's start by identifying a cult, Carol. I named
Yeah,
some of the characteristics that we might see in cults: manipulation, authoritarian leadership, rigid beliefs. What can you add? Maybe you can give a little bit of color to those descriptions of those characteristics, and give some examples that you have seen from your work.
absolutely. So, one of the things I think is useful is to think about these as high demand, high control groups, because we don't really have a definition for cults. And so, when we use the terms high demand, high control, then we begin to kind of define, in a sense, what they are. So, for example, high demand, there's a demand that you have loyalty to the leader. There's a demand sometimes for money. There's certainly a demand for complete and total obedience. And so those are the kinds of things that happen on the demand side. On the control side, you have where you live, who you marry, what you think, what emotions are good to have and what emotions are not good to have. Your beliefs are controlled, your behavior is controlled. Every aspect of your life is controlled. So the high demand, high control groups are kind of on a spectrum in a way. There are some that have less control, less demand, and some that have more. But I think that's helpful as a way to think about how a cult actually operates.
Now, how do you distinguish between what a cult is and what a religion is? Because a lot of these high demand, high control cults would have us believe that they are exactly the same thing, that they are a legitimate religion. So, how do we distinguish? And is there something that the law does to distinguish?
Yes, well, that's one of the problems that we have in the law is that both Canada and the United States have freedom of religion. And I'm not a Canadian lawyer, but I understand that in Canada it's a little more relaxed than it is in the United States. But in the United States, a judge will not entangle the court in religious beliefs. However, what they will do is look at behavior. So for me, it's not so important whether this is a religion because many of these organizations say that they are religions. We're not going to be able to prove whether they are or whether they're not. So, what we focus on is what is their behavior? If you're violating the law, it doesn't matter whether you're a religion or not. And so that's where the focus needs to be is what is the behavior that may be actionable in Canada or the United States might be criminally um, a claim in either Canada or the United States. As you mentioned with Warren Jeffs, um, Keith Raniere had people in Canada through Nexium. So all of those are opportunities to focus instead of the belief system on the behavior.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point because I think we can all agree freedom of religion is such an important principle to protect. But it, of course, does not protect organization
No.
from engaging in criminal conduct like sexual abuse or financial
Yes.
fraud. So I think that is such a core part of this concept that's so important. So, one of the things I'm interested in is I think a lot of, from my perspective, and you're obviously you work in this area. So, a lot of these groups to me don't seem like they start off as cults necessarily. They gradually transform over time with increasing demands on their members. But what can you tell me about that? How does a group transform that way?
I think it often is that way. So if you look at Nexium, that many people are familiar with, it did not start out as a high demand, high control group. It started out as these were executive coaching sessions, so that people who came into that seemed good, right? That very smart, sophisticated people came into that and they were like, yeah, I could use that. That's a good thing. And then gradually over time, there began to be more and more power and then more and more abuse of power. So to me, it's very it's an evolving thing that has to do with how much power the people in the group give to the leader.
Absolutely. And they might not be aware of it increasing over time because it can happen gradually. We've got to go to break now, but we're going to continue this conversation when we come back.